Yo, what's going on? I go by the name of Andrew Dada, and you are now tuned into the What's Going On podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest who's going to speak on a very important topic. This man's a good friend of mine. I bestowed upon him the nickname of African GQ just because he's known for such an eccentric styles. I mean, you gotta check this man's IG. This guy is an eccentric stylist. He's also one of the funniest, smartest, and hardworking people I've ever met. He happens to also be one of my good friends, to the point I can call him my family. With that being said, I would like to give a special welcome to my man Nana Kwesi. What's going on, man?
Yo, what's going on? Thank you for the really amazing intro. That's a lot of high praise, yo.
Come on, man. I do this. I do this.
I appreciate the heavy. And as always, it's very great to be here with you, man. Like you're such a great friend, always an inspiration in the gym, on the field, with school, like everything.
Oh, this guy's gasser. Another gasser, huh? It's all good. So Nana, man, for this topic, we're gonna get in deep, bro. You ready?
Sure, let's get it.
Let's get it. So I kind of drew inspiration from this topic. One, I asked people what they would like for me to talk more about on this podcast. You know, as we speak through this journey about how we're gonna resonate as young adults in today's society. Um, one of the people kind of the topic, kind of what we're gonna speak about, but like I want to touch on it more in a broader sense. I spoke of hypermasculinity, but like I want to talk about masculinity in general because I feel like a lot of times we kind of I think have it misconstrued or miscommunicated what that truly is. Do you not agree?
Yeah, I do.
Mm.
For sure. Definitely. There's a lot of talk about it on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram. You find like polls and stuff, and it's a hot topic right now. So I do definitely agree.
Yeah. I also think it's really questioned just because, yeah, with that idea of social media being on the forefront of it, like a lot of people, I guess it's just being more talked about. I think more being put to the exposure and being more put to the forefront than it kind of used to be. Maybe because we didn't have all that social media aspect way back when. Probably just like music, this is how it is, or this is how it's supposed to be, and that's it.
I agree. Definitely.
All right. So as always, man, like I said, we gonna get serious. Shout out to Sophie. That's the person that did put me on this topic of hypermasculinity. But we're just gonna talk about hypermasculinity even more. And you ready to get serious?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So talk to me. What's masculinity to you?
Personally, I think that masculinity is essentially like the expression of behaviors that has been like prescribed or ascribed to us as male identifying by society. It's like, oh, if you're a man, you're marked by these characters, and so for that reason, you have to do these things. That's what I think I'd call masculinity as.
Okay. No, I definitely resonate with that. Just because even still, I got this from Gender, Nature, and Nurture. On this podcast, we only speak with facts, and we're gonna talk with these facts. That masculinity defines the qualities, attributes regarded as characteristic of men, which is what you have basically said. And through that, when I studied this research, I kind of understood that masculinity is kind of socially constructed. But even though research suggests that like behavior is considered masculine or biologically influenced. So something as robust as a mustache, I think that's common in both boys and girls, but it's more commonly socially constructed that guys have the ones with the facial hair, right?
Yeah.
Even in like aggression, in terms like something as complex as aggression, that's more kind of seen with guys than it is with women. If that's wrong, feel free to interject. But I think that's where the generalization is.
Yeah, because we typically find that we've been socialized to like ask women to shave like or like to wax off that little darkness around their mouth. So definitely like mustaches are like markers that identify identifying people as men.
Even stuff like broad shoulders, that's kind of people only kind of resonate that with guys, right? Or like stuff like I mean I don't do this. Like I remember sometimes like you see on TV shows dudes burp like loudly in public, and that's cool. But if a girl burps, like ew, why are you doing that?
Yeah, definitely. Glad that you mentioned like other aspects like the broad shoulders because outside of like being an athlete, it's looked at as a mainly masculine feature because, well, like the break into like adolescence or adulthood from childhood is marked apparently by the widening of the shoulders to like allow for more muscle acquisition. There might be an environmental factor to it because I think that typically like guys end up going into the fields that require a lot of physical work, and the broadening of shoulders is probably like to allow for that, or like how we've been taught it is that those
Mm,
traits like were adapted to the male identifying species because they're going to be carrying the brunt of the work for that reason.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, carrying the brunt of the work. You elaborate more on that though. What do you mean by carrying the brunt of the work?
Like typically we find that a lot of sort of like manual labor, a lot of work that involves like a lot of brute force
Oh, like
is
yeah,
heavily male dominated.
like lifting crates.
Yeah, it's not to say that women cannot carry heavy things or that women cannot do manual labor or like women cannot be in fields which require like an excess of like manual or like physical labor, but it's just that we've noticed that more of those fields have been solely male dominated in that
Mm,
you look at construction workers, you look at like carpenters, you look at painters, you look at plumbers, all these people are typically
male
men.
dominated, right?
Yeah.
Even something like I know we were speaking about this yesterday, like something about like even like mixed martial arts. I'm glad, like I said, women are being put more into the forefront of it. Not that they were before, but like they're actually kind of being more put to the forefront, being like main eventers. Like, excuse me, one of the good fighters, Amanda Nunes, great fighter, great fight. One of the like she's called the lioness, but they also call her the baddest woman on the planet. Like I'm trying to tell you, bro, gonna knock me up. But yeah, like stuff like. But you see a lot of her fights. A lot of her fights, she puts on greater fights than some of the dudes I've seen fight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that it's like she's dominating in a male-dominated sport.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
think that's also like pretty cool. I mean, that's a veer off track. Let's move on. So I said we're gonna speak about masculinity, and shout out to Sophie once again for this topic. Let's speak on hyper masculinity, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What is hyper masculinity, and why do you see this being more prevalent in today's society? I'll start and say that hyper masculinity is a psychological term for the exaggeration of the male stereotypical behavior. Basically, like stuff like emphasis on like what we talk about: physical strength, aggression, toughness. You know, even when you're like in terms of great stress, you gotta be tough. Ain't no don't cry, nothing like that. Otherwise, you kind of looked at as like soft or weak.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? What do you think, man?
Yeah, I think that hypermasculinity is that cultural like overexpression of particular characters that mark an individual as a man. Like you mentioned, the emphasis on physical strength, dominance, like assertion, aggression, limiting one's like emotional self-control and like restricting or repressing emotions or feelings, not necessarily communicating them in the right channel. All of that I think falls into hypermasculinity, just trying to seem more macho or more manly than usual. Like what even is the term manly at that point, you know?
Right. So what do you mean by that though? What is the term manly at that point? Maybe like are you saying like I'm trying to figure this out. Like are you saying like manly as in why are we pushing ourselves to be more this aggressive, this like hero in a sense? Like in a lot of TV shows, like hyper masculinity could be that that Prince Charming that saves the woman from the tower. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Or that dude that's like sees the girl next door and tries to get with her. You know what I mean? So what do you mean by what is manly at that point? Are you trying to say now we're moving to a fluid state of masculinity, or like think hyper masculinity is fluid?
I think that masculinity is fluid because it's arbitrary and it's defined by whoever is identifying with it. Um, Obviously, this is socially constructed, and so in and of itself, how it's defined is dependent on a given society at a time, the time that they're living in, and just like the type of ideals that they subscribe to. And what I mean by what even is manly at that point is you find that in a lot of settings we're told the manly thing to do is to not
Cry.
the manly thing to do is to not talk about it.
Right.
The
Don't
manly thing
complain.
to do is to just walk away,
Right.
which is very destructive in my opinion. Like I don't think that's the right way to socialize a group of people, or like to teach a society that the manly thing is to repress your emotions, or to not learn how to communicate your feelings in an effective manner, to not learn how to advocate for yourself. Because you find that a lot of guys growing up being very bad emotional advocates for themselves. They're not able to communicate that a particular thing hurt their feelings. And this is not just amongst guys or amongst men, but also to women, like not being able to channel it the right way. And you find that it has a lot of adverse effects. So is that really what manliness is? Is that really what we want to identify ourselves by? That
Do you also think, like, I mean, sorry to interject, like, I know a lot of times when you say we talk about not opening up, finding the wrong way to communicate, is it just us protecting ourselves? Do you think we by nature, the reason why people say don't be like this, not how a man's supposed to act, is by inherently that men are more sensitive creatures? Can we say that?
I find that a lot of guys do say that they don't open up because, all right. So this is purely anecdotal of me. This is based on who I've met or who I know. I find that a lot of my guy friends go that they don't like to open up, and you find this on social media a lot as well. That they don't like to open up because they opened up to some one person, their one partner, or this one girl somewhere, I don't know, 12th grade, 8th grade, and she weaponized it against them. Like,
Yeah, the high school drama. Huh?
yeah, like they opened up and said, well, these are my fears, or I feel vulnerable in this state. And then she turned around and then
Used it against
called
them.
him weak.
Yeah.
Because again,
Diminished
society has taught us that being open about those things makes us weak, and it's just inherently that's misogynistic, because society is inherently misogynistic because of the patriarchy, in that women are seen as like the weaker gender or the weaker counterpart, where those things that mark a person as like being a woman are identified as weak.
Right.
And that is problematic, very problematic in my opinion.
That is very problematic because now it's telling them that they can't really truly be themselves. They have to put on this front, and that's what it leads to the programming. Like that's the programming. Why can't they just be themselves? Like if a man want to cry, he wants to cry. I was like 9 years old crying because I scraped myself. Somebody was like, "Grow up, my dad was like, grow up, you're a man." You know what I mean? Or like somebody else, like a friend, would be like, "Grow up, you're a man." I'm like, I'm only 9 years old though. You know what I mean? I'm only just a kid. So, but then after that, I just stopped crying because I was like, that's not attractive. Like to cry, like you're not supposed to feel sad. You know what I'm saying? You're just supposed to just take it. And it's like so weird to me because like now why I have to bottle everything up and I just feel even like worse.
Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure like 9-year-old you felt that scrape to be really painful. Like even if, oh, we're guys, we're men, are men not prone to damage? Can we not get hurt, like physically hurt even? Can we not feel pain? Can we not express that we feel pain? I tend to question these things a lot.
Me too.
That I personally think they don't make sense. They're archaic. They're really dated in my opinion. And I would like to know whatever the reasoning was for setting these things in stone as like these unspoken rules that we need to follow. Because it's just you really think deeply about it, and you begin to question what exactly was the reasoning behind it. Why exactly is it that as a man we should not express that we feel pain? Why is it that as a man we cannot admit that something is painful? Does being a man mean that we cannot ever be hurt, that we cannot ever be damaged, that we cannot ever go through something painful, we cannot experience something that actually hurts us? Like, honestly, I'd like to know.
So now it's gonna bring up a good question I have for you. Is hypermasculinity really wrong? Like, I think it's wrong. You know what I mean? Judging from this conversation we just have, I just feel like it's forced. Like, since it's been programmed in us to be that aggressor, to be that, that physically macho, dominating person, like, that strength, it kind of just forces us not to really see that and kind of just have a softer side. And it's just going to say, like, hypermasculinity is truly wrong because it's like a direct parallel, like direct conflict with femininity. Do you not agree? Or how do you feel like about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's wrong. I think that the
Mm-hmm.
fact that society prescribes to us the way that somebody should behave or live their life simply by the association of their sex organ, I think it's pretty ridiculous to me. You definitely summed it up right by saying that we are programmed growing up to associate violent or like overly dominant or overly assertive behaviors as masculine traits. And that incessant need to prove that one person is more macho or more masculine, it's quite pointless, honestly, because that line is arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
That confirmation, in my opinion, is due to the subscription to gender roles, which is another topic to talk about. But
Definitely.
like, I just always wonder, is there really a need to assert a certain dominance? Because I think that the mark of a charismatic person is that they're able to command a space
By
without
themselves.
like obnoxiously going out of their way to make you feel like respect me. I dominate this space. Like this is my area or
Funny how you
something.
say that. Like, as an example, like, this one dude, I was kind of working, like, the front door at a party, and, like, he was charging, this is way back when, I was charging, like, $10 to get in, and he was like, I think a girl was there. Do you know what I mean? His girl was there, and he was like, I think trying to like make himself look macho, like, oh. So I said, oh, it's gonna be $10 to get in, and he's gonna be like, what? I ain't paying $10. I'm like, all right, but bro, it's $10. You could leave or you just pay, bro. And he's like, what? What you call me? I said, bro. And he's like, I'm not your brother. I'm not your father. You gotta stop playing with me. I'm like, why are you getting aggressive for? Meanwhile, I'm talking to you like just how I'm talking right now. I was talking like that, and he was like, "Bro, I ain't playing with none of y'all." And I was like, "Okay, but it's still gonna be $10." What do you like? You know what I'm talking like? What you talking about? And yeah, he's paid it. He's like, "But I ain't playing with none of them. Better know who I am." I'm like, "Bro, like, it was never really like that because I wasn't trying to be aggressive with you." Even when I was working valet, um, this one guy, I told him like his car came late because they didn't tell us to go pick up the car until later, and then I was like, "Sorry, so I'm sorry, sir, for the inconvenience, for bringing up your car. I hope there's no problem." He's like, "Nah, there is a problem. All right, man, there is a problem." And meanwhile, he had his girl with him too, and I'm like, "Do men just do that as an impression or like as in like a aggression type thing just to show who they like truly are? Like, I run this area, like I'm in control."
It's funny you mentioned because I took primate behavior and we studied different primate societies, and you find that in chimps, um, in baboons, when there's a female around, the males tend to compete amongst themselves by like doing this aggressive show or this aggressive display where like they have to call out really loudly or like bare their teeth to intimidate the other males, to sort of like catch the attention of women. And I'm not associating human beings with apes. I'm saying that it that particular type of behavior just like reminded me of that. And people like to draw the line and say, well, it's evolutionary and it's found in nature that the male species tends to act in a more aggressive, more kind of intimidating way, especially when there's a female around. And it's funny you mentioned that because a lot of the noise that was made in that scenario and the two scenarios that you mentioned, and yes, I called it noise because it was really unnecessary. It was unwanted.
You know what I mean?
There was no need to do all of that. I mean, the price was $10. Pay $10
Or
or
leave.
don't.
Like, bro, that it's like simple. Like, what you thought you were gonna bully me into telling you to pay less? No. Pay $10 and leave. Or like, but like, it's just funny how you say that. Like, we do different things to really show like assertiveness or something like that. Like, I remember a good friend of mine. Used to go to the gym. She used to be saying, "I'm scared of the gym." I was like, "Why are you scared of the gym?" Because the guys lifting weights intimidates me. You know, like, how's that intimidate you? Just getting the workout in like everybody else. But I have to really look at what they're saying. Like when I went to like retro fitness after college was done, I could see what they're saying. Like, guy pulls up strong as hell, like Hulk Hogan, like arms. You know what I'm saying? Lifting like good 315 on the bench, and yeah, I seen that. It's actually crazy. 315 on the bench,
That's pretty impressive.
and like you just looking at like yourself like, whoa, I'm weak as hell. Like I gotta step up. But it's like that competition. I think that's what the masculinity is. That competition, to just be better than your fellow man. It's so crazy, so interesting. Cause that's why it's like if you do that, that means I can't be a protector. Or subconsciously, maybe that's not, but like subconsciously, I always think like maybe I can't be the protector, or like I want to be because this one guy is just better physically.
It's funny you mentioned the gym because going to Star at Temple, I like even before Star was constructed, IBC for example. So like at Temple, we even have sort of gendered gyms that's just like amongst the college students. Like most of the women go to Tough, where it's more free weights and like machines. Like just it doesn't really go high up. You don't have like I don't think you have a lot of bench setups or like squat rack setups, as opposed to like IBC was or presently is, or even like Star, right? So a lot of women prefer to go to Tough because one, there's a lot more women there, and guys don't typically go there because there are not enough heavy weights for guys to bro over. Like that show of like masculine energy that you just mentioned. It's funny, I even called it masculine energy, but like just that show of, hey, look at me, I can bench press like 315, I can like squat 400. And I mean, it's great that guys compete amongst themselves into becoming better, like physically, athletically. I respect guys that do that. I mean, people set goals, they want to get bigger, they want to strength train, and so they're like trying to increase their rep max, they're trying to increase their weight like weekly and stuff. So like definitely like go off with that. But you find that the gym is typically the place where like a lot of creepy things go on, and a lot of guys like a lot of guys, I'm not even gonna miss my words, a lot of guys do bully women in the gym. In that, if a woman gets to the bench, the guy comes, hey, how many sets do you have left? Like,
Or you mind? I'll low key look. It's not even just women though. Guys came on me and I'm like, I'm still doing my weights. He's like, hey bro, how many sets you like? I just started.
right, and you find that guys typically would ask the woman how many reps or how many sets she has left before they go to ask the other to go ask guys over there. And I mean, I don't think that you can deny the fact that it's in thinking that, oh, she's a woman, she's going to be lifting a lot less, so like let me go ask her first. Should probably get off the bench before a guy does. But I don't think that is pretty level ground. I don't think that is pretty equal, because it's just simply asking who is maybe more proximally close to you, or just asking whoever you're less intimidated by, or I don't know. I don't want to speak for people, but I just think that you find that most guys will walk up to the squat rack and ask a woman like how many sets she has left, or to the bench, especially to the bench, ask a woman how many sets she has left, which is undermining that women also do use the gym to lift. And I find that this particular reason, at least amongst like my female friends, they tell me like when they go to the star, guys are always asking them, hey, how many sets you have left, or like just being creepy by like giving them unnecessary stares in the gym, doing a lot of other things that are again unnecessary. So like you find that in the gym, that show of masculinity, and I dare say like that excessive show, that hyper masculinity like item is really, really prevalent, or like seen a lot in the gym, because again, we've come to think of the gym as like the men's den, like the place that is male dominated. I think that
the conversation, you think like the conversation needs to be shifted towards like it could be everybody's gym.
exactly. Like we don't need to have like gender gyms based on what's there.
Right.
I mean, I could be going through an injury, or I could just simply not want to lift heavy today, and I should be able to go to tough and people not look at me funny because I chose to go to tough. Or women should be able to feel welcome in
For those
in the
who don't
men's
know, sorry to cut
gym.
you off. Tough is another gym at Temple University,
Yeah,
and typically, quote unquote, is where the women go to work out, where the guys like to go to the IBC or Star.
right. And another thing too that like a lot of my female friends have mentioned to me is like they go to IBC or Star and it has a stench, and it's like another marker of like hyper masculinity, where it's like, oh, it's a guy's space and like it's definitely going to smell a certain type of way, and that like people sweat a lot and don't keep like really good personal hygiene, and it typically smells a certain type of way. There's a stench, and then people like equate that with being a man. Is like, oh, the manly musk, the manly stench, but it's, we shouldn't smell disgusting to be identified as guys. It doesn't equate.
You got me wrong, bro. I smell like chrysanthemums. You know what I'm saying? Smell like dandelions. Like what you talking about? But I hate smelling bad, bro. And it's so funny because I'm glad now, like stuff like that is kind of seen. Like personal hygiene is kind of being put at the forefront. Like I remember I used to say this to my friend all the time. Like I get a manicure and pedicure. You know what I'm saying? Like. I have women out tell me they appreciate me for getting that stuff. And I'm like, ain't for you, for me. I like looking at my hands and I'm like, shake my hand. See, I got my nails be looking shiny and all that. It's kind of cool. Like, I never had that before. But, like, that personal hygiene, it should be make more of a habit that people should. It's kind of so funny how people think, oh, guys don't like, I always have nasty nails. I always have, like, nasty toes. You know what I mean?
Like that little cocaine finger with like the little finger like really grown out long.
Yeah.
It's a hazard, by the way, and it sucks when
it's about safety. Safety first, guys.
like it sucks when it also breaks. But like you're right, because I for one take Pilates, and every time I step out, like I get a lot of weird stares from men and women, from people in society, like, oh, he's holding a mat. What's going on? And people automatically start to ask, do you do yoga? I'm like, oh, I do Pilates. And the stare gets even worse. Like, oh, it's not even yoga, it's Pilates.
I would have thought you some Afro Samurai. I ain't gonna hold you.
This guy. But like, I go out with my mat because I'm taking Pilates. I'm taking these classes because I wanted to better myself. And people look at me weird. And people look at me funny. Simply because I wanted to learn how to control and move my body in space and like train my body. Also like get more in tune with my body. And people look at me weird because we've sort of gendered exercises where like people look at yoga and Pilates as the more feminine exercises, and I guess maybe typically you find that like those spaces are dominated by women because there's a pressure placed on women to tone their bodies to look a certain type of way, whereas like as guys, like you're supposed to look more chiseled, more bulky, more husky. It's kind of interesting to me because
That's what we gotta explore for real.
yeah, like it's kind of interesting to me. A person's choice to partake in a certain exercise I don't think it should be dictated by society. I think it should be dictated by
By the
what the
person.
person needs or what the person wants. The
Right.
person needs and wants, what the person wants to get into, what the person is about, what the person likes to do.
Facts.
And there shouldn't be any questions asked. There shouldn't be any unwanted stares. Like there shouldn't be any.
Talk your talk. Nah, go ahead.
There
Talk
shouldn't.
your talk.
There really shouldn't be anything wrong with me wanting to do something that is not typically identified as masculine or male. I just think that that is another marker of like hypermasculinity, where like people tend to go the extra mile of like policing what you can do.
So funny. So funny that you mentioned that. And I'm glad that you finished with that great statement. Cause now, bro, we about to take a quick interlude, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about something pretty deep. You wanna know what it is?
Yeah, talk to me.
We're gonna talk about toxic masculinity,
Oh man.
and then we're gonna talk about what we as men in today's society can do to make the conversation better, make ourselves more aware of hypermasculinity, toxic masculinity. Wow, that was messed up. And true masculinity. How you feel about that?
I'm ready.
You ready?
Let's go.
Let's go. This is what's going on. Again, and you're now tuned into the What's Going On podcast. I'm here with my very special guest, Nana Kwesi. What's going on, man?
Yeah, we're just chilling.
Just chilling. So, Nana, kind of fill me in on what we talked about before the break, man. We talked about what what masculinity is, like a basic sense of it, right?
Yeah.
Then we went deeper and talked about hypermasculinity. Why is it prevalent? Why we actually viewed hypermasculinity as wrong,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like we had some really interesting discussions when it comes to hypermasculinity, exaggeration of the manliness, of the macho-ness in terms of aggression and dominance, or even how masculinity itself is just something akin to more of the male characteristics, such as like, something small as a mustache, facial hair, or something robust as assertiveness.
Yep. Yep.
But guess what? We gonna go deeper, bro. You know what I'm saying?
So let's go.
We're gonna talk about toxic masculinity. Crazy. And we're gonna talk about, excuse me, from everything we just learned, what can we do as society or as men in this today's society to kind of make push the conversation forward for to gain or to grasp true masculinity. What you think about that, man?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Let's go, let's go, let's go. So talk to me. What's toxic masculinity to you? Yeah.
I think toxic masculinity ranges across like many different behaviors that are normalized in society today. I think that it takes hypermasculinity to like another level and teaches people, especially men, especially young men, that in order to be considered like a true man, a true male, you need to exhibit certain problematic behaviors like excessively asserting your dominance in any given space, like refusing to express your emotions or communicate them, or policing what other men, as well as women, can and should not do, or can and cannot do, what they can wear and what they cannot wear. Like just feeling like it is within your jurisdiction to dictate what a given individual can do. It's to me
Right.
that's toxic
It's like
masculinity.
you're just trying to gain control, right?
Yeah.
Ain't that necessary? Like, I don't know why controlling behavior. Why do people view that as like a necessity? Like, I know we talked about this earlier too in the podcast, but like, why do people view, like, what happens if why do people need control over somebody else to feel better about themselves? Like, what would be, I guess, the consequence, if it even is a consequence, if they lose that control over somebody?
I think that, and I'm in no way educated enough to like make a statement for everybody or to make it for like human beings in general. But I think that at our core, we're trying to protect ourselves. At our core, we're scared of who's going to hurt us, and we tend to lash out before it's kind of like, oh, you see a threat, so like you see the threat before it can become a threat to you. It's in that space. It's kind of like, well, you're taking out your fear, your insecurity in that moment, and trying to make sure that you've made it easier on yourself. You've claimed your territory in that space. Like, it's kind of like, to me, when a kid sees a bug, it's like
Mm-hmm.
they know if the bug stings them, it's probably gonna hurt. So like they're gonna kill the bug first. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like that. Like if I'm to see any type of bug in my room, like I'm not going to bed. Like it's either I die or the bug dies. And
Oh,
like
that's facts. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, and like there'd be certain places, like not in my house, but like other people, I see like a roach, right? Ready to kill that like ASAP, like stomp on it, and it even like certain bugs, like when I was a kid. I used to have like Nerf guns. I seen like a bee on somebody's back. And I used to like squirt a Nerf gun on her back just to kill that bee. And like that's just so crazy. 'Cause I was like, yeah, you know,
yeah, so it's like I think that at our core, like we try to in that way protect ourselves by eliminating whatever we think is a threat to us. Like we lash out first. We
mm-hmm.
need to make our presence known and aware and to be recognized as something to be feared,
Yeah.
so that the threat cannot like be a threat anymore to us.
Mm-hmm.
And quite honestly, with ourselves, like
Yeah.
personally, I don't think it's necessary to like assert unnecessary, like show this unnecessary display of like dominance, because I think that is counterintuitive to the image that we try to pull when we like step in a place and we want to command respect by force.
Mm-hmm.
I think respect is earned, and we
Mm-hmm.
tend to typically conflate respect with fear, or fear with respect, in that people think that they need to put a certain fear in you to gain respect, and that conflation should never be made, in my opinion.
So leading up to that, what do you think are some signs of toxic masculinity? Because we really have to, I think, crack down about like if we feel like we really or we don't truly know this, but I think we can kind of point out the signs in our sense. You know what I'm saying? So let's just go over some of them. My first one, what I viewed as some sign of toxic masculinity, of course, is devaluing women.
Yeah.
Like toxic men tend to look at women as objects that can just completely exist to them, for what they want, where they want, when they want. Now, some example I have, like you see the cat calls, like, "Yeah, what's going on? Hey, you!" Like, don't even try to get her name, like describe her, like, "Hey, you in the white dress." You know what I'm saying? Or like grabbing her, like some people like the party to be trying to like grab the arm instead of just saying "excuse me" or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, do you see that as like some type of characteristic or sign of toxic masculinity?
Yeah, I think that it's very evident in what we mentioned with like asserting that dominance, like think like making it seem like people are disposable and are like objects to them, especially women, because we've grown up like looking at women as like the weaker gender, like the weaker counterpart, and in that way, like we tend to disrespect women a lot, like you mentioned with the catling, which brings me to a very interesting one. It's been talked about recently a lot, where like guys refer to women as female,
Right.
or with the
Or
B word.
the
Like
B word.
that is highly disrespectful, because
They are.
guys like attach like that ambiguity, like you mentioned, like a lil ma,
Or
instead
even
of like
like,
getting to know their name.
right. Sorry, my bad.
Now you're good.
Even like with like the term girls. I know I said it mentioned earlier, but I always say like my girl or like my girl. But like girls, like instead of like, I think we got so used to saying girls that like we forget that they're women our age, because women would always call us men, but like we always fail to say, like, I think that just goes back into the first stigma of like how we much, I think subconsciously that devaluing plays a part. Do You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like the system is inherently patriarchal, and you find that, like, I like to just like circle right back to like calling women females, right? Because a lot of people think that there's no problem in calling a woman female, because if you called me a male, I'm not gonna have a problem with it. But then I think that the point is not about whether or not you, the guy, would be offended. It's in the mere fact that that ambiguity in referring to a woman who has a name, who has a story, who has a life, has been reduced to just a female. And if women tell you that they find that disrespectful, it really isn't about whether or not, if you were called the opposite of a female, which is male, you'd be offended or not. Like, it's really not about how you feel as a guy. It's just there is a lot to somebody, and just diminishing their entire existence or like personality or persona to referring to them as female is just inherently disrespectful, because a lot of people fall back on calling women female, so as sort of a crutch for not calling them the B word, right? And it's the B word in itself has been derogatory since its inception. And then even with that, a lot of people will be like, oh, but she calls herself the B word too. And I think that, well, if she chose to call herself that, that's her prerogative. Much like likening it to when black people call themselves by the N word. Like, they there's a reclamation of what the word means to them, and the way in which they use it is not how typically you find that in our society it's used, like in our music, on the corner, in the streets, like, and even in our classrooms. It's typically in a very disrespectful manner to women. And it's so, and for some guys that I've come across, they say, "Oh, we understand calling them the B word is just offensive." And so I'm saying female. But if you know that that is a replacement, like, it's kind of like using a replacement slur to refer to somebody as another slur, when calling any person by a slur in itself is problematic. It's offensive.
That's like using the shit word, and like, sorry, we don't curse on this podcast, so that's why we're not really saying the cuss words, but it's like using sugar honey iced tea.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's like, bro, you just better off saying the word, I think. Like, but like, it's just more weird that people really try to like censor themselves when you can just really just not use it in your vocabulary if you don't really find it offensive.
Exactly.
Let's go on to the next one. Next sign of toxic masculinity, which is so funny to me, because when I found this on the website, what was the website? The Dating Bliss Toxic Masculinity. What are the signs? They mentioned narcissism, and they go on, and it's going to say, like, if you ever met a man who thinks he's never wrong, has an ego that doesn't quit, wants to dominate every conversation or situation, self-love, egotistical admiration for one's attributes. And this topic is so iffy, because narcissism is also very fluid, right? Because you should have self-love. Like, we promote self-love like all the time. You know what I'm saying? You should have a I feel like you should always want to win. Why would you want to lose? What the hell? Like, yeah. I mean, yes, I view that I think what they're trying to say is the closed-mindedness is the toxic masculinity. The idea of, I don't want to change. This is my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Either you leave it alone or you move on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or not. Basically, the lack of empathy in
Yes.
that narcissistic attribute. Or, like once you said, dominating every conversation, situation. Like, oh, this is my money, or I don't have to pay you for this party. All right, no, go. Is it by force? You know what I mean? What do you think, man? Egotistical too, man. Talk about it.
Yeah, I think that narcissism is a trait that is in people, period. It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, or if you don't identify in the binary. Like, I think that any and everybody can show narcissistic traits. However, I think it's a sharp marker or identifier of toxic masculinity, because it circles right back to that power struggle, that incessant need to possess power that the patriarchal system is set up, like you mentioned, never thinking that they're wrong, like thinking that their word is law, and this like bleeds into a lot of other things, like which are societally influenced. Examples are like religion, culture, and I'm not here to talk against or about people's religions or cultures, but then we can admit that there are those elements of um, favoring like the man over the woman, or like debasing the woman, to just like like rehash the earlier point of like devaluing women. It's like you raise a man to like, you put a woman down to raise a man's status, or to like tickle the ego of a man, and it comes right back to exactly what you mentioned, being egotistical. So like men in that right feeling like, well, it's been given by all these avenues, like however we grew up, these avenues have allowed for us to just feel like, well, guys are on top. It even goes back to this saying, the very popular saying, "This is a man's world." It's in our song lyrics and everything. Like, this is a man's world. That is essentially like self gratifying of the man, and wanting to dominate the space, wanting to like never quit. And amen, like self love is great. Like, we advocate for self love. You need to love yourself.
You need to love yourself, but
However, like putting other people down to love yourself, is that really loving yourself? I don't think it is.
or that means you hate yourself. I think if you have to put someone down to like put yourself up, you hate yourself. Why I say you hate yourself? Because you feel like you the next person's better than you, so you have to say, they have to shut him down to make you give that self gratification of, yeah, like I'm better, so you suck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So next one, which is a very it's so funny because this resonates with me. Cause I think if anything talks about masculinity, emotion detached might be one of the things. I've been called sensitive, but like I've also been known where. All right, let's go into it. Like, have you ever met a man who never shows emotions even when something bad happens? They can't show emotions or remove themselves from their manliness even for a moment. Like you know, I used to be a crybaby. Like, it takes a lot for me to show like me crying to somebody. Like, I could be cool. Like, you'll still see me like being like kind of like anxious or jiggity, but like to really get me to the point to like break down sadness, like and show that in front of somebody, that's a lot. And I don't. And I've been told sometimes like I can't show my emotions properly, or I can always try to keep my cool. Some like when something bad happens, but like a lot of times just me just holding in, making sure like being smart enough to say like if I say this might be a wrong move. Or what do you think? Or you think that's still toxic? Like should you really reveal your every emotion in that moment? I mean I don't know, bro. Like
I personally have been called emotionally unavailable before. I've been called emotionally detached before as well. Um, I think that a lot of the behaviors we put up as adults are things that we picked up from our childhoods. The first model are from the home. So like, if our dads kept telling us like, you're not supposed to cry because men don't cry, because there's a like, I grew up being told that there's a pressure placed on the patriarch, the father, the breadwinner, the one who's putting food on the table, down, to bear an image, and that like crying is a sign of weakness. And so if you're seeing that your rock, your patriarch, if you're seeing that your financial security source is broken down and weak, it teaches you to look at the act of showing that weakness a certain type of way. And when dad is telling you that you shouldn't cry, and mom is telling you, well, men don't cry, and obviously this is not to speak for the masses, because there are many homes where this is not the case, right? But for a lot of people that I know, they've mentioned that they grew up hearing all around them in society, in their classrooms, oh, as a guy, don't cry. Like on the playground, oh, you're a man. Why are you crying? Like that's a weak sign. Again, as mentioned earlier, that those traits that are like into the feminine characteristics
Right.
are seen as what makes a man weak or less of a man, or that devalues their masculinity. And I think that masculinity is defined by whoever identifies with that. And so we learn to repress our feelings because to show that we're hurt about something, we're going to be clowned, or we're going to remember how uncomfortable it felt when we tried to express it and they told us, look, men don't cry. And that's the only memory that has like formed part of like how we assimilate that type of feeling, that type of information feeding like in our brain. And so we just end up not opening up. We'd rather shut it all in. And this extends into how we find that a lot of depression, anxiety, and suicide cases are a lot higher in men.
Yeah.
It is commonly known, especially in today's times, that the majority of mental health issues are suffered amongst men because there are no proper channels for men to advocate for their emotions. There are no proper channels that men can find that they can easily let out about what's bothering them, about the pressures of being a man. And it's weaponized against them because everybody in society has been taught that, look, it's a sissy move. Even using a gendered term like sissy in itself is testament to what I'm talking about, I think.
Yeah. I hear you. I definitely hear you. And it's gonna be kind of cool how you mentioned that, like, sissy move, or the idea to be dominant, because it's leading up to our next thing about controlling and possessiveness. And in that statement of controlling and possessiveness, you kind of view it as like, I feel like men naturally want to be, like I told you before, like, I kind of view myself as wanting to be a provider and a protector. You know, it's why I go so hard with my grind, like when I work, while I'm in school, so I can get that good job, of course. You know what I'm saying? Like, but even like working out, making sure I'm that protector. But I think people, we as men, can kind of take it a little bit too far. The idea that we need to control our situation and make sure everything's set to our schedule, not putting in the mind, that the other person has feelings or the other person has their own life. It's not just they're working around your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we have to feel the innate, like I was asking that question about why we feel we have to need the innate controlling and possessive nature in our environment. And I think it really does stem from that idea that we want to be protectors, we want to be providers, we want to be that person that can do those things that people can look up to and say, yo, go to Andrew, he knows how to do this. Go to Andrew, he can got you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go to Nana, Nana, I'll do that for you, bro.
Andrew definitely got you though. Like,
oh man, cool. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But like, I think sometimes we do tend to take it overboard. Like, there'll be times, like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I did feel like I was out of control sometimes and I didn't like it. Like, it made me angry. You know, like, why is this not going my way? Why are you going out the grain, the plan I had? Now to come to find out, life teaches you, like, you can have a plan all you want until life punches you in the face. You know, I had to change that from Mike Tyson. You know, Mike Tyson was like, yeah, whatever plan you, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, life definitely has, everybody has a plan for life until it punches you in the face. You know what I mean? But, like, you really start thinking, like, life really does change whatever plan you have. Like, okay, I'm going to be like this, like that. And then, say, like, even, like, with the whole COVID-19, like, everybody had trips for the summer. That got canceled ASAP.
shut it down real quick.
Because life hit you. Life definitely hit you. Now we're all stuck in quarantine having Zoom parties. You know what I mean? But going back to topic, bro, like, do you feel like hypermasculinity and toxic masculinity are the same? I think they're slightly different. Like I said, even though they are talking about the same toxic, the same bad aspect of masculinity, like, one is talking about the over-aggression of the male dominant trait, and one is talking about, like, the behaviors that been programmed. Well, they both talk about behavior that have been programmed to us, but like one's talking even in extreme measures about how they've negatively and affected our health
Mm-hmm.
and what society views men to be.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Um, I'd say that in some ways, like I think it's really understandable how like people view them as one and the same. I think that I don't know. It's like the Ouroboros. It's like the snake that eats its tail, the dragon that eats its tail. To me, I think that they're as a result of each other.
Mm.
Because toxic masculinity is marked by these beliefs that men need to exhibit like this aggressive nature, these aggressive behaviors, um, to validate their masculinity, and hypermasculinity is as a result of them, or is the showing of these traits that we understand as masculinity, and like taking it an extra step. So in that way, it's like they sort of lead to each other, or like they're sort of the same to me. Like quite personally, I think that they're like as a result of each other. That well, toxic masculinity is the overarching term of all the destructive behaviors or attitudes, or all the destructive things that we take this hyper masculinity, because I think the qualifier hyper is saying that okay, well, there are certain traits that have been traditionally from a place of sometimes science, but mostly culture, marked as masculine behaviors, and like it goes overboard with it. I
Mm.
think that's what the hyper right there is. Like it's like you take the normal, you take the norm, you take the status quo, and then you like go overboard with it. You overdo it in a certain type of way. So I think that hypermasculinity is like the working of toxic masculinity, and toxic masculinity is the overarching term that is encompassing all of these things that we've mentioned, or these things that we've talked about.
That's a fact. That's a fact. And like we can even end on this aspect. So now, how can we be better aware as men? You know what I mean? How can we, I guess, push the conversation forward? I'm not saying everything gonna get solved in a day. Everything, we're only what 20, 23, 22 year old talking about what masculinity is when we don't even know the true aspect of ourselves. We're just becoming young adults, right?
Yeah.
So like, how can now we better is where to push that conversation forward? So like, we're not gonna be perfect, but at least we can be a lot better than we used to be. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, like we must take a stand for, we must be accountable for our actions. Right
Yeah.
now, knowing what aspects we have that are toxic, say like, yo, instead of saying like, nah, I don't think I'm doing that, but say like you actually did it. Like it's okay to say that you actually did do these things. It's okay to say that I'm not proud of it, but I was this person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that accountability that you have can kind of push you forward because like you realize you made a mistake, and then let's fix it. Let's work. You know,
Yeah.
um, we must try to find a way that we can't really harm ourselves or the next man or the next woman. You know,
Yeah.
because like today's society, I think that's what we think manhood is, like an act of like harm against each other when it's not. It's a beautiful thing, honestly.
Yeah.
Teach you how to be I feel like true manhood can really teach you to be a brave, courageous, you know, exuberant person. Like when you in a room, people know it's you. They don't. You don't have to say nothing. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I feel like manhood also is the capability for the love of your fellow man or woman. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we're required to act. Sometimes we're required to show love. It's not about hate. It's not about dominance. Dominance is not true love. That's not even. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that we have to show that love, bro. And I think that's what I've learned from today's message of what masculinity truly is. We have to show that love for our fellow men and women. That's the only way we can truly, I think, we can truly move that forward.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, bro?
Yeah. I think that it is worth it to acknowledge that the system has been patriarchal from jump, and that the status quo has been typically in debasing women. I think the first step is acceptance. I think that we need to accept that this is what it's been. Now, I think the next step is understanding that, well, it's wrong. There's nothing dignified in putting down women simply because they have different physical markers than we do, and even like, especially now more so than ever, even now, like, it is up to whoever is identifying what they choose to identify as. And information has been made readily available right now, especially in this present day. So like refusing to do that is just like being closed-minded. And I think the next step in that is like being open-minded and ready to learn, being ready to have these conversations, because I do understand, I do recognize that these conversations are pretty difficult to have on both sides.
Yeah.
And just having an open mind, being willing and ready to hear what somebody has to say, we really can learn from each other. It's great that like we sat down to discuss this topic. It's great that we talked about it, but like beyond that, it's just like being willing and open, because information gets updated every single minute, every single time. Like it's always changing. Right. You cannot choose to be stuck in the old ways. Like just be willing and accepting of how information is changing, how things are going about in the world, and just like keeping an open mind. There's no dignified aspect to being closed-minded, especially about how people identify. It's a person's identity, and I think that masculinity, whatever it is solely dependent on what the individual identifies it as, and it shouldn't be something that is prescribed and forced down everybody's throats. I think that there's a range, and there's a spectrum for which everybody can exist on it, because like I mentioned, like it's what you identify as, and
it's how it's also the growth. I think true masculinity happens with your maturity. I know maturity is, of course, for both sides, but like true masculinity is the maturity to your how. It's not what you say, how you say it, not what you do, how you, not what you say, but it's the timing of what you do, right? And I feel like that's the true, honest maturity. And I'm gonna just end with that point. Like, I feel like in order to truly be a man, we have to be empathetic, mature, and live, learn, and grow as well.
Yeah.
And man, well, that's all for today's episode of What's Going On. I want to thank y'all once again for just tuning in to the episode, man. It's really been an honor. It's really been a pleasure that you guys could tune in to A Dream of Mine. This podcast has really been a dream of mine. As always, Nana, thank you so much for tuning in, for joining me on this journey as we discover what manhood is, man. It's always been a pleasure to talk with you today, man. Yeah. Let them know where they can find you. You know what I'm saying? Let them know where they can find you at, man. You know, you gotta get the followers up.
My Twitter and Instagram are both _IAM Nana K _IAM NANAKAY.
Cool. You know, as also please follow me on IG as well at Dada 2_ the 2_ Don. And follow the page, the What's Going On page at what_S going GOING on pod, and Twitter at Dadavelli, 2_ at the end of Ellie, DADAVELLI. And you know what I mean? Make sure you check us out on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You know, we're gonna be on every major podcast platform. Whenever you could tune in, man. Live, learn, grow. Like I said, you know, make sure you just never miss out. You know, we got some good topics, good conversation, dope music as well. And speaking of dope music, we're about to get into a very good song to close out the episode. Shout out to my guy Che Sav. You gotta make sure you guys follow him, Che_Sav. He's an upcoming artist. And I appreciate him for putting this song, allowing me to use this song for my platform. So make sure you guys go give him a listen. The song's on Apple Music. It's called Set the Tone, and we'll see you guys next time.
Girl, I know you need a man, baby. And you know I'm the type to do you right. Treat every day just like it's February. The 14th ain't ordinary. So let me taste the forbidden fruit. I sip the juice like it's cranberry. Set the tone, girl, it's vibrant.